What's up, guys? This is going to be a big video and very important because we are doing authentication in GraphQL. Now, I really want to do this because not a lot of people have done this and shown a good way to do this. So that's what I'm about to show you. So to help me out with this, I'm going to be using three different libraries. The first is JSON Web Token. This guy is going to help me out with creating JSON Web Tokens. And then the second one is bcrypt. Bcrypt allows us to hash passwords and then compare if they entered the right password. And lastly, we're going to be using Lodash. This is not required for authentication by any means, but it's just I'm going to use a utility function out of this to help us out. Alright, so let's install all these libraries. So I'm going to head over here to the command line here. Just going to clear up, and I'm going to do yarn add Lodash, bcrypt, and JSON Web Token to install these. Now, I already have a GraphQL server set up with Node.js, and that's what I'm going to be running this on. If you don't have one set up and you'd like to follow along, then I'm going to put it linked in the description below. You can clone my GraphQL server template, and that way you can follow along. Alright, so we installed those libraries. The first thing I want to do is actually set up a proper user model. So I set this up in SQLize because we're running on a Postgres database, and we have a username field here, but it's not unique, so we need to fix that. So type, and then unique is true. So I'm just going to properly set up this user model now that we're going to be using this for lots of different things. And for some reason, Visual Studio Code is just popping these up all over the place. No trailing space, no trailing space. Okay. And we can copy this. And the same thing is going to be for email. And the same thing is going to be for password, but it's not going to be unique. Okay. So, oops. Reason we want unique is because you have to have a unique username or email. That's kind of how we're identifying you. And then password just stores as a string. Alright, that's cool. That's all we need for that. Before I forget, I'm going to pop over to PSQL and just do drop database test. I forget what the heck I named my database. Oh, I think it might be test. Yep. And I'm going to recreate it. Test GraphQL DB. And the reason I'm doing that is because I created some columns. And don't forget \Q to get out of PSQL. So I just destroyed the database, recreated it, that this is going to be using. Reason for is because I added fields, and SQLize does not migrate things well. Alright, let's get into the meat of this. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is going to the resolvers. Sorry, not resolvers. First I want to do schema. And I want to add a sign up and a login mutation. So we'll call it register actually. Let's do a register. And to register you need to have a username, which is a string. You have to have a email, which is a required string as well, and a password. That's how you create a user account. And out pops out a user that we have up here, and now user will also have an email attached to it, along with all this other stuff. And I'm just going to get rid of create user. We don't need that resolver anymore. And now I'm going to create a login, which you need to pass in. We'll say you have to pass in your email, but it actually doesn't matter. We could say your username as well. We'll do password, and then out pops out a string. So whenever you log in, if you pass in the correct email and password, we're gonna pass back a string, which will be a authentication token, a JSON Web Token, and that'll be what you can use to basically authenticate things. All right, so this is all we need here. I'm going to head up to my resolvers over here. We have create user. We don't need that anymore. We're going to call this register, and call this login. And I am just going to start up my server to make sure I don't have any syntax errors, which I commonly do make when creating the schema, and looks like everything is looking nice. So we can finish up these resolvers. So there's a few things. Let's start out with the register function that is going to be happening. So we're going to actually make this an async function here, because we're going to be doing some async things. So right here, we're going to call args user, because the arguments that we're going to be passed is username, email, and password. And now the only thing we need to do to create a user is we need to hash their password. So we need to say user.password is equal to the hash version of the password. Now bcrypt is actually the library we're going to use to hash it. So I'm going to come up to the top of my file here, and I'm just going to say import bcrypt from bcrypt. Right, and save that. Come back down here, and we're just going to head over to the bcrypt documentation so I can show you guys the options. So here we go. We want to hash this a password. We're going to be using just the technique 2, the autogen assault and hash, and we pass in the plain password that we want, and then we pass in how many salt rounds, and then a callback function. We're not going to use the callback function because we're using async await. This is new syntax from JavaScript, and we're just going to do an await. And then we're going to pass in the password that the user gives us, and I'm going to put 12 salt rounds. That seems to be a standard for how many salt rounds, close to like the minimum. You probably could go more if you wanted to. I'm not an expert on how many salt rounds is needed, so I would recommend Googling that if you want more information on how many salt rounds you should use. But anyway, so we're going to do await bcrypt dot hash, and then I'm going to pass in the password that the user gave us, and then 12, the number of salt rounds. Alright, so we are basically replacing the password that they had with a hashed version. This is an async function, so we're waiting for it to finish and get the value back. And then we're creating the user. So we're just going to say models dot create, user dot create, and then passing in user dot user, and this is going to get returned. All right, I just need to put a comma here, and this looks pretty good. So we replace the password, then we just create this user. So that's all that's happening with register. And you notice we don't even have to worry about, filtering out the password here, because I mean it doesn't make any sense to give them a hash password back. In our schema, we said users don't even have a password field for them to grab, so they won't actually see it. So now we can actually just come over here and test that. So I'm going to create a mutation, and I'm going to say register, and it doesn't look like it's auto-completing, so something's wrong. This looks fine. I'm just going to refresh my GraphQL. If yours is not auto-completing, just refresh. Usually it's just being slow. So username, I'm going to say Bob7, email bob7@yahoo.com, and password, I am Bob7. Alright, and I'd like to get the ID, the email, and the username for this user. Alright, cool. So we see it here. And now let's go back to the database real quick. I'm just going to open up a new tab in my terminal, launch pSQL. I'm going to go ahead and connect to the testDB database just to show you guys that we hashed the password. So select all from users. You can see this is the password field right here, and I could even just select the password. You can see it's a hash now. So that's exactly what we want. So now we're going to work on the login page. So this is going to be an async function as well. And for this, we're actually going to need to pass in a secret. And now I'm going to actually create the secret in our index page because we're going to need it here as well, which you'll see later. So a secret is just used to create the JSON web token, and this is just a random string of things. I'm just going to create one like this. If you go online, there's ways to create a secret. I'm not actually sure exactly what the best way is to create a secret, but the most important part is don't let anyone else see what your secret is. I'm just going to use a random jarble of letters for now to show you this. I recommend Googling what is the best way to create a secret. What I've done in the past is just used like a secret generator, and then I add a couple letters at the end. Alright, so we have this secret. I'm going to pass it in as context here, so that way we can access it in our resolvers. Alright, tab this guy over. Secret. All that. Cool. So now I can actually use it in my login. And I don't know if I mentioned this, I'm making this function async. And I actually don't know if I need to make it async or not. I might get rid of the async. I can't remember if we do any async stuff in this. Alright, so the user is going to give us two things here. An email, and actually yes, we do need an async. I just thought of why we need it. So we're going to get an email and a password. So the first thing is we're going to see if we can find a user that contains this email. So const user, and we're going to do models.user.find1, and we're going to be looking for an email. So where the email is equal to the email passed here. And we just say if not user. So if we didn't get a user back, it's null or something, it's empty. That's bad. We didn't find a user with this email. So we're going to say throw new error, no user with that email. Alright, so now we know we found a user, we got their email. Now we also need the hashed password of this user. We want to check it against this password and make sure they gave us the right password. So if we come back to bcrypt's documentation, we can see they have this check a password function that we can do. So we're going to compare. So we do the password that they gave us and then the hash. So this is the password we're going to take from the login, and then the hash that we got from the database, and we're going to compare them. And very important, this is an async function here, so we need to await it, and so is this comparison, so we're going to await this one as well. So const valid, and we're just going to say bcrypt.compare, and again we're going to do await, and here again we're getting the plain text password, which is this, and then the hash password, which is user.password. Alright, and we check if it's valid, and we really only care if it's not valid, right? If it's not valid, we're going to throw a new error, and we'll say incorrect password. Alright, and now if we've gotten to this point in the code, they put in a correct email and they put in a correct password for that email, so we are good to go. Now we just need to create a JSON web token for them. So let's come over to the JSON web token documentation, and I'll show you the function that we're going to be using, and it is sign. So this is just creates a token for us, and as you can see, we pass in the data, our secret, and when we'd like it to expire. Now the only thing that might be confusing here is data, which I'll explain over here. So first let's import JSG from JSON web token. And we are going to say const token is equal to dot sign. And remember there was three things. This was the data field, which we're going to have an object. This is going to be the secret. The secret we're getting from the context right here. And then lastly, when we want to expire, and we'd like to expire in 365 days. So I think that's how you do days, 1 hour. I'm thinking this is how you do days. We might have to change this later if the syntax is wrong. It looks like they're using, come back over here real quick. I think, yeah, here we go. This is how they do the expires in. So if you want to know what the other ones you can do, they're all right here. So we're going to put 1 year. That's actually what we want. So our token is going to expire in a year. So we don't need that. So yeah, you can come look at this if you want to know what other values you could put here. So I'm going to put 1 year and okay. So what is a JSON web token? Why am I putting data here? What should go here? And why am I passing a secret and expires in? So when I run this jw2.sign, what's going to happen is we're going to get a string like this. So a token is going to be equal to something like blah 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 dot blah 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 some garbage dot blah blah blah. I think there's 2 dots in it. The periods are significant. The stuff in between is like some hashed garbage. So this string can be decoded, and you do not need to know the secret to decode it. So that's very important. And you can, when you decode it, all you get is whatever I put here. So for example, what we're going to do is I could say, I don't know, my name, you know, whatever you want, like, and put Bob here. So now we have like this data that we're passing in, my name Bob. So anyone can decode this token, and what they would get is an object called, this object right here, called my name Bob. That's not very useful. We're going to put different stuff in here, but that's just to show you that whatever you put here, anyone can decode it and know it. So you don't want to put sensitive information here. You just want to put information that your client needs. And then the expires in, it tells you how long this token is good for. Because what we're going to do is we're going to actually use this to do authentication. So if it's been past a year, you actually can't authenticate. And this will make more sense, the expires in and the secret, why we need the secret when we actually check authentication. But just know, when we do this sign, we're getting this long token which has this data in it, and it's signed with this secret, and you need this secret to verify the validity. So there's 2 things. There's verify and there's decode. Verify needs secret, and this tells you whether this is a correct token, and this is what you use for authentication. So use me for authentication. So this will do on the server side. This does not, it doesn't need a secret, and use me on the client side. So we'll actually do this in a React app, is we'll actually decode the token on that, and then we verify the token here. So we're in a little bit we're going to be verifying tokens, but here what we actually want to put is user. And if we pop back to the Lodash documentation, this is actually what we want to, why I wanted to use Lodash, to use this pick. So what pick does is you take an object and you pass an object as a parameter, and you tell it which properties you would like, and those are the only ones you get. So A and C, and you get A and C back. So as I was saying, it's just a utility function, so we're going to be using that. Oops. So here I want to do .pick on the user object, which we got here. And the only thing I want to return is the ID and the username. This is important because then we now have the ID of the user. This never changed. The username possibly can change, so this is susceptible. But the ID never changes ever, or shouldn't ever change. So we can use this for when we're creating things. We can have this ID and we can verify. And this will make more sense when we use it later. But for now, we're returning token. All right, so let's test this out. So I'm going to head over here. We created our user Bob7, bob7@yahoo.com. I'm going to copy him, and then I'm going to use I am Bob7. So I can actually log in here, email, password, I am Bob7, and then we should get a string back, which is the token. Bam. All right, here's this token. And now we can actually decode this token. So I'm going to go to jwt.io and we can actually just decode what the heck is in this thing. So they have this little thingy here. I can put in my token here, and hey, this is a random website knows that it has an ID of 1 and that the username is Bob. That's crazy, right? So anyone can decode these things. But that's just to show you what it looks like decoded. And we're actually going to use this to authenticate now. So we have this token. So our client, if we have a React application, they're going to get that token and they're going to save that token. And they're going to use this to authenticate later. And we're actually going to add something right here to do authentication. So I'm going to add some middleware. So I'm going to say const add user. This is going to be a function that gets a request, and that's actually all we need. Actually, no, we don't. We also need the request and the response. And then in here, and this is going to be an async function as well, I'm going to do try. It's going to be a try catch here. Catch an error. And we're just going to console.log the error if we get an error. And we're going to import JWT from JSON web token. And we're going to do JToken.verify. So this is what I was talking about verifying. We're actually going to get the authentication const token. It's going to be request.header. I think it might be headers. We might have to change this. It might be header or headers. I forget. And we're going to get authentication. This might need to be capitalized too. I always forget. It's not written dot notation. That's fine. Token. So okay, so we're going to pass the token in as a header to every request. We're going to get the token here, and then we're going to verify that the token exists. And we get an error if it's not. And so we'll just come over here and I'll show you what verify. So the verify, you want to get the token, and then see how we need the secret here. That's important. There is just like I'm pretty sure there's like a decode here somewhere. I'm not going to look for it right now, but we're verifying, so we need the secret to verify that this is actually correct. So we pass in the token, we pass in the secret, and then we're going to do const. We can get the user back. So the response is going to be whatever data we passed here, which is an object which has the user. So we're going to get the user out of it. And then I'm going to do await. And then with the user here, I'm going to do request.user is equal to user. And then at the bottom here, I'm going to do response.next. Oops, did not mean to pop back over there. Okay. So we have added this middleware. So every request to our GraphQL server now will run this middleware, because let's do app.use add user. Okay, now it is. So on each request, we're going to grab the authentication header. We're going to get the token, which they supposedly should pass here. And then we're going to try verifying the token. If it's a legitimate token, we get the user back, we pass it in here. And the reason why we're putting in the request here is so down here, we actually can get the, we can actually say request and we can pass this into our context. So we have user.request.user. So in our GraphQL Express route here, so this guy right here where we had our seeker and our models, we can take a request. We already passed the user, so this is run before this is. So it grabs, goes here, adds the user, and so we can actually get the same user here and pass it in here. So now our resolvers have access to the user. So just to show you that, what we can do is in one of these, let's say get user. I'm going to get the user here, and we're just going to console.log user. And of course, keep this the same by returning that. Okay. Now in the index over here, it's important though, if we don't pass it in as authentication in the header, the user will be null. So that's how you know whether the user is logged in or not, is you can check this user here and say if user, then they are logged in. Else, it's like a not logged in user. So you can do like a little check like this if you want to. Okay, so we got this. Let's actually run this and see what the heck actually happens. Now, I'm going to grab this token so we can use this one because we already have it. Now, unfortunately, with this, you cannot pass in headers. So we're actually going to be, for this, I'm going to be using this GraphQL application, which is what you see right here. It's basically just a desktop application that allows you to do graphical things and also lets you add a header. So put this in the link description below if you'd like to download it as well so you can follow along. And this one looks like it's for Mac, but I believe if you click on releases, looks like there's some Windows and Linux binaries. I think you can get it set up. Okay, so I'm going to edit the headers here. I'm going to add a header. And also it should be called authorization. I don't know why I called it authentication over here. Authorization. And cool. And this should be pointed at 3000, I believe. And now I'm going to get user. And let me just make sure it is on 3000, right? Yep. Usually you'll see this load, so something is wrong. Let me just come over here. Okay, it looks like the server's good. Unhandled promise are depreciated. That's fine. Okay, this is not working, so I'm just going to relaunch it. And that's unfortunate. It looks like it's just not working. Okay, it's having trouble making requests. So I'm just going to do an audible real quick. So I was expecting this guy to work. But one thing, if this does happen to you, is you can actually use postman and just do a regular post request. So let's do that. And so I'm just going to get out of here. And real quick to just show you what an error looks like. Oh, also, two things. One, let's show what an error looks like. So I put in the wrong password for login. Oh, shoot. It's actually our server is messed up. It's not that thing. It's actually messed up the server. I'm assuming this guy is wrong. So what we're going to do. Unhandled promise rejections in the future, promise rejections must be provided. Okay, so this is wrong. I think it might be a request.next, maybe, not response. Okay, yeah, that's what it was. Okay, so here you can see this is what an incorrect password looks like. So sorry guys, this is supposed to be just request. We don't need a response, my fault. And this might actually be working. So just so you know though, you can also use Postman or any client that lets you do a post request to access GraphQL too. So, but you saw we have an incorrect password here. Let's show you incorrect email too. So notice it also checks the email too. Okay, cool. But let's continue on with showing you how this guy is working, this add user. So over here you can see we're getting some JSON Web Token errors, and then we expect that, right? Because we're console logging it here because there's not an authorization token. But anyway, so we have the headers here. We added the header. We're pointed here. Now I'm going to say get user, pass in the username. I don't even know what the user of this guy is. It doesn't matter. We don't need it. So I'm going to run it. Get users null, which is fine because this is not a right username. What we wanted to see though, if we come over here, is we console logged. We see our user here. Awesome. So what this will let us do is over here in our schema, this get user, we're going to change that to me. So this will get your own user. And you don't have to pass any parameters because we actually know who you are based on the token. And this could possibly be null. So in our resolvers over here, we can check if your user is logged in or not. So, we'll keep them there. So we're going to call this me, pop that over. And yeah, actually this works fine. We don't even need an else. So if a user exists, we're going to find a user. So args here, because we're not passing arguments. Email, or we can just find it by ID now, because we have the user.id. That's the best way, and the ID never changes. Return value, return null. So we check if a user exists for me, the user we're getting from the token. We have the ID of that user, which we can then find that user in the database and get all the details. So to show you how this works, you can come over here and run me. And if I just refresh it, and don't have to pass any parameters, can just run it. And this thing is in my way. Okay. Username, email. So cool. Notice how it knows all these things about me, even though I didn't pass any parameters to it. I didn't tell him I was Bob7. It knows I'm Bob7 because I have this token. If I delete this token and I run this, oops. We get null. We're no longer logged in. That's how it knows who we are. Whew. Okay guys, this was a long video, but I think that about wraps it up. That is how authentication, one way to do authentication in GraphQL that I quite enjoy. There are there's one flaw with it, which is the username. So let's log in again real quick. This token. So from the client side, if I were to decrypt this token like I telling you we would get this username, right? Username Bob7. But what if I go and change my username in the database? This token never changes and it's good for a year. So until the year is up, Bob7 is going to stay here. So we're going to think the username is Bob. So You really just use it for the ID here, or things that are not going to change. You want to pass in the token. Or what you can do is refreshing tokens, which I'll talk about. Is a whole different subject, which I'll talk about in a different video, because I actually do refreshing tokens in one of my projects because I need constant good information in my tokens. But this is just, well, that's a whole different topic we'll talk about in another video. Yeah, this is how you do JSON Web Token authentication. This is one of the simplest ways. I'll put all these links in the description below, all these ones I have up here, so that you guys can take a look at this and get this set up yourselves and take a look at how this works. I'll put all the code on GitHub as always. That'll be linked in the description below, so you guys can get this, use this, play with it, try it out. And I think that's it. I'm going to be doing some more videos with this because now that we know this, I know if the user is logged in or not. I don't want to check if the user is logged in here. I want some permissions, right? There's certain resolvers here that I basically want to give permissions to. Like user boards and user suggestions, I only want to grab those maybe if I'm logged in or if I'm the owner, that sort of thing. So I'll show you some cool ways that you can do permissions with those in future videos. But I'm sure if you guys have any questions or comments or different ways to do authentication in GraphQL, I'd love to hear them. And if you had any trouble setting this up, please let me know in the comments below, because I'd love to help you get set up, because I know this is very important to get right. And security and authentication is huge. So yeah, that's it for this video, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.